We all love paying it forward. However, are you up for the ultimate paying it forward gift?
Welcome to Love Life, featuring your host, Jane Donovan.
The sun shines bright as it moves across my face. I feel the light.
My guests today are activists for encouraging people to give the ultimate gift, the gift of life through organ donation. My guests today are activists for encouraging people to give the ultimate gift, the gift of life through organ donation. Joining me on the couch is Cassie, a recipient of 2 corneal transplants after losing her sight in her teenage years. Also joining me is Lee Barthel, the daughter of an organ donor and author of a book for children to support them through a traumatic time. And Philippa Jones, donation specialist nursing coordinator with Donate Life SA. I feel this is an important conversation to have. As a culture, we just don't do death well. It's something most of us are not in a hurry to experience, and we certainly struggle often to have the conversations with loved ones about, well, what happens when? That said, my recent conversation with the gorgeous Ben Lee, a death doula, besides being an amazing musician, has injected positivity that we are starting to head in a direction of understanding and embracing death in a more positive, heart-centered and loving manner. Now, if you want to have a listen to my chat with Ben, check out episode 205, and I'll pop the link in the show notes. As with many of the episodes, I love to share stories of the ripple effect, of how heart-centered actions create great change for others. And so often, those others, well, they're just not known to us. We don't get to hear the great stories. And yes, to hear is validating, it's encouraging, and while it's not necessary, it sure makes us feel so good. So today, I want to celebrate life and the ultimate gift we can give, the gift of organ donation.
It's time for Heart Talk.
Cassie is now 27 years old. However, at only 14 years old, she started to go blind. Traumatic for anyone, however, even more heartbreaking in a gorgeous teenage girl who prior had lived her life with full sight. By 20, she was blind. Cassie is the recipient of 2 corneal donations, receiving the first corneal transplant at the age of 20. I start by asking Cassie, how has this changed her life?
It certainly it changed my life. Prior to the transplants, I was losing my vision. I was refusing to go out. I wasn't living life, that's for sure.
So can I ask how old you are, Cassie?
Currently, I'm 27. At the time, I was 20 of my first transplant.
That's incredibly young to be losing your vision, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly turns your world upside down, because you're watching your friends go out and achieve things that you wanted to achieve, like driving cars and, they've just had that more independence than what I had.
And so was this an illness that you had for a long time, or was it something that was suddenly happening? Were you born with it? What was the history of losing your sight?
So I started to lose my eyesight during high school. So I was about, 14, 15 at the time. So you're sort of going into year 10, starting to lose your sight, it's not the best thing to be going through.
No, so up to that point, there was no indication you were living life as a completely, I don't like the word normal, we're all normal, but what's normal? It's a setting on a dryer. But up to that point, you were living what we consider to be an average, everyday, normal life of a teenage girl going about her business, and like most of us probably believing that life's not going to change too drastically, I'm just going to go on living forever and my health will be fine. And then you were suddenly starting to lose your sight. I can't even imagine how terrifying that must have been for you.
It was, in the beginning, you don't realise at the time that you're losing your sight, because what you're seeing you think is normal. It's not until you get like your first pair of glasses and you go, oh, there's, like there's lines on leaves and, there's definition again. And then you go, oh, I've been missing a bit for a while. I was diagnosed with a condition called keratoconus, and it's where the cornea thins and it changes shape, which distorts the vision. So in the beginning, it was managed through glasses and contact lenses, and, that was all fine. But over time, the vision continued to deteriorate where glasses and contact lenses were no longer an option.
And so you got to a point that you were pretty much housebound and told that you had to have a transplant or you were going to be 100% blind. Is that right?
Not total blind. Like there was still, like it was extremely blurry. So there was still, I could still see some things, but yeah, there was no definition to it. So I was using a cane to get around.
Wow. And so did you have to wait for a long time to be a recipient to a donor?
So I was put on the list in January, and I wasn't expected to receive a transplant till about April. Then out of the blue in February, I received a call to say that there was a cornea for me.
And I imagine that would have been incredibly exciting to hear. But did that also, was it bittersweet knowing that somebody has passed away as a result of this incredible gift?
It was a strange, emotional time. I still remember it as if it was yesterday. You go into this shock because, like I said, I wasn't expecting it for another few months, and I wasn't prepared for it. And you're thinking about the donor family and what they must be going through, and in between that, you're trying to think of what you need to do to get ready to go into hospital the next day, and it's just a roller coaster of emotions.
I can only imagine, but how amazing that you now have wonderful vision. And what has this gift meant to you with regards to everyday life? How has your life changed as a result of now being able to see?
So it's changed quite dramatically. I've regained my independence. So just before the second transplant, I actually purchased my own home.
Congratulations!
Thank you. I've also been travelling all over the world now, so I'm living life.
Joining us also is Donation Specialist Nursing Coordinator with Donate Life SA, Philippa Jones. I imagine that this is one of the most sensitive areas to work in, and at a time of deep trauma for family and friends that are involved. I start by asking Philippa, is this something that is very time sensitive, and does everything have to move really fast?
I guess it doesn't need to move really fast. I guess what makes our job the most challenging is that we come in and meet families at one of the most challenging and sad times of their lives. They've either just lost the one person that they love, or they know that they're going to. And so the skill of us is to go in and offer them support at end of life. And I think part of exceptional end of life care is talking about their opportunity to donate organs and tissues for transplantation. So once we go and meet the family, it usually takes about 24 hours for us to arrange that whole entire donation process, and that's supporting the family. That's, I guess, finding the best recipients for the gift that this family are going to give. We go to theatre with that person, and then we follow up the family afterwards. The important thing is that people say yes to organ donation because they want a positive outcome. So listening to Cassie's story and that bittersweet feeling that somebody's had to die for her to regain her sight, the donor families don't see it that way. They appreciate that nobody caused this to happen to the person they love, but what they're doing is giving that gift. They're paying it forward, and I think that's the most powerful thing working with these families is they're so proud. They're so proud of this one person to maybe change the lives of up to 10 people with one gift, and I think that's amazing.
That is amazing. Do you find, Philippa, that there is resistance to some families where perhaps the person that has passed away has clearly stated they want to be an organ donor? But do some families really struggle with supporting that?
Families are much less inclined to go against your wishes if they know what they are. So if you've registered on the Australian Organ Donor Register, if you had a meaningful conversation with your family, look, they are more likely to say yes. They want to uphold your wishes and they want something positive to come. Families, this is an incredibly difficult time for them. They're distraught. They're often sleep deprived. Most of the deaths are sudden and unexpected. So decision-making is really impaired. It's incredibly difficult for these people to make rational, enduring decisions, and that's my role, is to support them. And, you know, people say that we shouldn't go against donation wish, but I care for those families that are still here. And I think if this is going to damage them more, then my job is to look after the people that are still here. And it's about working and supporting those families and making sure that the best decision for them on that day is what happens.
Is it encouraged for recipients to contact the donor families? How much of that goes on? Because I could imagine that as being absolutely beautiful and such a divine connection from trauma.
Look, it is. We have incredibly strong privacy and confidentiality laws, so we can't exchange names or any of those things. But certainly, as I said, donor families say yes to donation because they want somebody to, you know, to have a positive life. So any correspondence that comes from recipients to our donor families is just cherished and it's highly encouraged. On the other side, I can see sometimes the recipients take some time to write something and some of them never do, and it doesn't mean they don't appreciate the gift, it's just they don't know what to say. But I would just say to anybody that has received an organ or tissue, those two words of thank you are the most powerful words that you can jot down. It doesn't have to be a letter, it just has to be thank you. And our donor families just love to hear that because they know it's a gift and they'll never know what happened to that precious gift they gave, but sometimes just learning that is so important. So we do highly encourage, you know, people just to send something back. And in fact, sometimes our donor families are those that reach out first and they just want to tell you a little bit more about the person, you know, that gave you that organ. And it's just beautiful when it happens, and it's lovely.
Cassie, are you curious about who was the donor for you?
Oh, I mean, it's something that's always on your mind, you know, just in relation to writing to the donor family. It took me, I think, 2 years to finally send off that letter to say thank you. I rewrote that letter so many times because you're trying to find the right, you know, words to say, you know, how grateful and thankful you are. It's a really tough letter to write.
I love, Philippa, your words of really, it's just those two words, thank you, isn't it? I'm a blood donator and I received, not long after I first started many years ago, I received a letter that was a very personal letter. It was handwritten saying, thank you for donating blood. This is what's happened to me. This is my story. This is how, you know, people like you have saved my life. And not just that, but this man was a father of many children, and it had a beautiful emotional side to it. Now, clearly it wasn't my blood that had gone to this particular guy. However, that's irrelevant, isn't it? It's really... And that's what I'm hoping that part of us doing this story today on this episode is for people to understand that to say thank you, it doesn't have to be beautifully written. It doesn't have to be articulated, gorgeous. It just is that powerful feeling of knowing that you've made a difference in someone else's life is incredibly self-fulfilling, I feel.
It is. And I, you know, when I talk, because we often will talk to high school students or community groups, which we're always happy to go out and speak to people and just try and share a little bit about organ and tissue donation. I talk about the 2 points in our physical life are the moments we're born and the moments that we die, because it's going to happen to all of us. What is the cool stuff is the stuff in the middle, the stuff that we do in our lifetime, the decisions, the love, the heartbreak, all of those amazing things that we have as humans. It's at the end of life that you can make that decision to pay it forward to somebody else, to allow another family, another Christmas or another birthday, to allow that person to reach their full potential, because that's what we want. We want people to be given an opportunity to reach that potential, to experience all that life has. And I think that's such a powerful thing as well.
What fears do you think, Philippa, people have that prevent them from registering as an organ donor when they're in the prime of their life?
Oh, look, I think it's difficult. We all like to think that we're going to live forever. We don't necessarily think about our own mortality. And I think, particularly when we have children or when, big moments in our lives are occurring, we don't want to think about that, the finality of our life. And so a lot of people just don't get around to it, I think. There's probably a little bit of that apathy that has, in our communities. People are sometimes concerned, I guess, when I meet families, they don't want that loved one to suffer anymore. And it's about ensuring that they understand about that their loved one has died or will be dying, and there will be no more pain, there will be no more suffering. And if this gift of donation won't add to that, it actually will pay forward some pleasure into some other family because they're getting that person that they love back to their full potential. So sometimes I think it's just the apathy. Australia is such a big country, and we separate things into states, and here in South Australia we have over 60% of our population registered on the Australian Organ Donor Register, and that's by far the highest in the country. So for us, it's about encouraging people to make that decision for themselves. This is an autonomous decision you make for you. You register, and your family need to uphold your wishes. So I think it's a powerful thing that we should encourage people. You have a choice over this. This is something you can choose to do. And I guess it's trying to encourage people and educate them about what does it mean to become an organ and tissue donor and how important it actually is.
I have had a conversation with somebody who said they won't do organ donation because they want a body to be buried. Now, my understanding is, and they also wanted an open cast, and my understanding is that the beautiful physical body is actually very well respected in this process. Is that true?
Look, that is the concern for people about the desecration of the body, or will we able to view the body after we've donated and the surgery. And I say to people that absolutely you can. Organ donation surgery is some of the most highly respected and respectful, but also it's incredibly challenging. We need those organs to be the most pristine. Sometimes people talk about a slash and grab, which sounds awful, and I don't mean to put that in people's minds.
That's perfect. We need to use these words because this is the conversation that people are not having, but it's in their mind, and let's get it out and talk about it openly.
That's right. So it's not. As I said, these organs, to work properly in their new home, need to be retrieved impeccably. It's incredibly difficult and intricate surgery. So we have cardiothoracic surgeons that will come and retrieve the heart and the lungs. We have highly specialised abdominal surgeons that will come and retrieve the liver, the pancreas, the kidneys, the intestine. All of these organs are treated with such high respect because they need to be perfect. The donor family is always honoured and the donor is always honoured. We always stop a moment and we thank the person, for the gift that they're giving. And afterwards, the body is sutured up as any other person would be after any operation. The dressings, everybody is cleaned and washed and their hair is brushed and we care for them. And, the families receive that person back to do what their religion, what their customs, what their culture determines that we do. And we are always respectful of that. And I think the families need to understand. We play music, we have photographs. We can bring teddy bears into theatre. We do all of those things so that the donor family knows that that person is not alone and that person is a person and they're not just coming to theatre with us. So we honour them very much, and I think that's important for people to understand.
Cassie, I'd love to ask, you had your beautiful letter that took you 2 years and 100 different drafts to write, and then you sent it off. I'm just curious. I understand that not everyone is going to enjoy receiving that, but it may be just as difficult for the recipient of that letter to be able to write back. But did you hear from the donor family?
No, I haven't heard from either of them.
Were you attached to that outcome, or did you wish to just literally send your love, send your gratitude and thanks without the need to hear back from them?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting, to receive anything. For me, I just wanted to just express how thankful I was and what the gift has enabled me to do.
Philippa, I was surprised to hear you say, is it 60%, did you say, in South Australia? People are registered as donors?
That's correct. So in the whole of Australia, so we have a population of about 24 million people. Last year, 502 people were able to become organ donors. And that sounds like a really small number, and people are often incredibly surprised. And so it's important to also understand that less than 1% of the population will die in a particular way that allows organ donation to occur. Tissue donation is by far the more common of all of them, and so there were thousands of tissue donors, and tissue is things like cornea, bone, skin, heart valves. So blood, I mean, you can donate blood when you're alive, and that's classed as a tissue as well. So there's lots of other ways. So if you can't be a solid organ donor, then there is a great opportunity to be a tissue donor. So there's also another way that people can transform and improve other people's lives just by the gift of tissue.
That's great to know because, you know, we all hope that we're going to be blessed to live very, very long lives and that we kind of, you know, go sliding into that coffin sideways going, yeah, great party. And, you know.
Absolutely.
So there's the, you know, the 90 plus really tired, very well worn out body. It's still
Beautiful.
useful. It's still useful in some ways.
Absolutely. I'm led to believe when I last spoke to the Eye Bank of South Australia that the oldest corneal donor was 99. So, and I just reflect on what have those eyes seen in those 99 years, and now they're paying it on again and allowing somebody else like Cassie in her 20s to see some amazing sights as well. So please don't ever think you're too old, you're too sick, that you smoke or you drink or, you know, some of the lifestyle choices. That doesn't stop you from being a donor. You still have an opportunity to give that gift.
This is the ultimate pay it forward story. So Cassie, thank you so much for sharing. Any final words that you would like to share to encourage people to participate and become potentially in the future an organ donor?
Well, I'd just, you know, like to recommend to people to have that discussion about organ and tissue donation. You know, I tell my story because, you know, I know how much receiving 2 corneas have helped me, and if my story can, you know, help encourage people to have that conversation, then, you know, that's all I can ask.
Philippa, how do people participate in registering if they haven't done so already in Australia? Now, bearing in mind, I know this is international, so many of our listeners are going to have to, you know, Google within their own countries. But within Australia, what do they do?
Yeah. So in Australia, Medicare holds the rights to the Australian Organ Donor Register, so it's a confidential register, and you can jump online. You can visit them at medicare.com. You can also go through the donatelife.gov website as well, and we can link it through. At any Medicare office, you can pick up a pamphlet which will give you some information, and at the back there's a registration form that you can fill in, and postage is free. You can send that back. There are many ways. I guess the important thing is to do that, but also have that conversation with the family, as Cassie said, because it's them I'm going to be talking to about you. And it's a two-way conversation, because I may be talking to them about you, but I might be talking to you about them. And it's having a conversation as a family to go, well, this is what we do as a family, and these are the decisions I want. You know, when I can no longer make them for myself, can you please uphold my wishes? And that's the important thing. So there's plenty of ways. We still have the licence here in South Australia as well, so you can tick a box on your driver's licence.
Is that enough? I thought I'd heard that that's not enough.
So certainly it is. In South Australia, we will still upload that information to the Australian Organ Donor Register. Now, that goes on as an intent, so it's something that you've ticked a box. If you go online or you fill in the pamphlet, it's considered a consent. So there's a little bit of different terminology. So one's an intent, I've thought about it, so we'll upload that. But one is a consent. I mean, you've read information, you've filled in this form. This is a really powerful tool that you've used. So I know that when I go and meet your family, that I'm going to advocate for your wishes. I'm going to be your voice when you no longer have a voice for yourself. And I think that's the important thing that families, you know, need to understand, is that we're talking about the individual. We're not talking about a family, but we want to do the best by that person. So please register your intent so I can be your voice.
Leah Barthel sadly lost her mum Christine in 2011 after a sudden bleed to the brain. Christine gave the ultimate gift that resulted in 3 people having their lives saved, including a recipient of a double lung transplant. I want to apologise also for the quality of the audio. Unfortunately, we did have a few troubles. However, Leah's story is so beautiful that the words are important to be shared. I asked Leah if she was aware of her mum's wishes to be an organ donor.
Mum had actually discussed it with me from the age of 10. Now, to a lot of people out there, they would think, gosh, that is a really weird conversation to have. But when the whole reason why Mum was so passionate about it was because my dad was killed in a car accident when I was 2 years of age. And my dad was only 24 years old when he died. So Mum felt that it was such an awful waste of a life. There was nothing that anyone could do to bring him back. But the grief and the overwhelming situation she found herself in as a 22-year-old, she just wished that someone had been able to spare her that pain. So had someone given the gift of life, or had Dad given the gift of life, maybe he would have saved a few other families feeling that way. Knowing what we know now, there's no way in the world he could have been an organ donor. But the thing was, that was the massive catalyst that actually created her passion around wanting to be an organ donor. And she went to great lengths to make sure that happened.
Beautiful. I'm sorry you lost your father so young too. Now, Leah, was there anybody in the family that wasn't supportive of your mum's decision?
No, it didn't even. I'm an only child, so at the end of the day, the decision stopped with me. There was no one else no one else really had an input, but more importantly, within our family, it was Mum's wishes, and that's what she wanted. And she talked to me probably 2 or 3 times within the few years prior to her passing. And in saying that, that is the most important thing anyone can do, because my mum was registered on the AODR, which is the Australian Organ Donor Register. She had it on her driver's licence, which was a legal form at the time of her passing, and she'd had the chat. But ironically, I still had the power to overturn it. And that was the most stressing part of the whole process, that I, in my grief, could have quite easily overturned that. And it was just, that was awful. That was because Mum was being an organ donor. She was treated like there was like so beautifully. She was looked after and cared. I know that she would have received the same care, but the way they looked after her and cared and nurtured her and made sure she was okay was beyond words. It was just beautiful.
So it definitely has helped you, knowing that you've helped others in your grieving process, do you feel?
Yeah, and this absolutely has been part of our healing as a family. Not only knowing that she's helped those families, but the processes, our organ donor coordinator created a moment about 2 hours before we turned off the machine. And she asked if I wanted to take my mum's handprint. And that was just so beautiful, because my mum was a school teacher and it was like she was finger painting on her last day. And that handprint has just been a massive part of our healing. It's been something that has helped not only myself, my children, my grandmother when she was alive, and so many other people. It was just absolutely beautiful. But most importantly, what that moment created for us, like we were in this white, sterile ICU room and we had Mum covered in red paint and we were hysterically laughing, and this joy-filled pain or pain-filled joy, however you want to say it, entered the room, and it was this magical moment that I always have to treasure. And that's something that was so unexpected before you're about to face one of the toughest moments in your life. And that was totally created by our organ donor coordinator nurse. So the other part of the healing has been the letters. And the letters, I can guarantee every single time I'm having a tough moment, a letter arrives on my doorstep.
And
without fail.
are these letters from the recipients?
Yes, that's correct. I've received probably about 4 or 5 now. Yeah, it is so special. And the privacy laws within Australia, just like they keep their identity anonymous. So when Mum first donated her organs, we knew that I knew there were 2 ladies received a kidney each, and 1 lady who was 29 received Mum's lungs. So we knew that information, and they give you a little bit of brief description, but we were given a form that asked if we were open to receiving letters from our recipients, and that was something that I just really wanted to know that they were okay and they had survived the process and that they were doing okay. So I said that I would definitely want to hear from them. After that happened, I received a letter from one of Mum's kidney recipients, and that was the first letter I received, and that was a beautiful letter. It was really, it was tough. It was really tough to read, but it was beautiful at the same time, and it does take a little bit of a toll on you when you receive these letters. And then I had the toughest time after Mum died, probably about 9-10 months after she passed. And it was like a realisation that she wasn't coming back. And I was celebrating my birthday. It was my 40th birthday. And it was something that I was supposed to be having an amazing time and celebrating and catching up with friends and family, and it just wasn't the same without her there. It was traumatic. It was the darkest place that I've ever been, and it was somewhere where I've never been before. And so then I received a letter from the girl that got my mum's lungs.
Leah, I want to ask about your children. Did you tell your children that that Grandma was going to be donating organs?
Yeah, we did. Well, as you can imagine, they saw Mum the day before, and then all of a sudden we had them. We actually didn't involve the children in the process because they thought there could have been a possibility that they would get the bleed under control and Mum may make a recovery. So we didn't let the children know at that point. It wasn't until the neurologist said that things were very grim that we decided to let the kids talk to the children. That was the worst conversation of my life. It was awful. My children were 8 and 10 at the time, and my mum was a massive part of their life. She taught at the school that they attended, so they saw her every single day. So it was really hard on them.
Did they understand the concept of organ donation?
Yeah, we tried to put it into childlike terms. Ever since I was little, death's always been part of the conversation because it happened to me so young. So I think there had been a brief conversation, nothing too in-depth, but just that sometimes when you pass away, you can give the gift of life that actually saves someone else's life. So it was more, not too much into the nitty-gritty, but enough to give them a little bit of an idea.
And do your children also read the letters that you receive from the recipients?
Yeah, I've sat down with them, especially the one that I received around my birthday. That was the turning point for me. That was the biggest part of my healing, because at that point in my life, I was feeling like an orphan, and I was 40 years of age. I was an adult. I had my own children, but this sense of being the one left behind when Mum and Dad had both died. And
so you shared the stories of the recipients with your beautiful children. You've then written a gorgeous book, a children's book about organ donation.
I have. Bearing in mind that that conversation with the kids was one of the toughest conversations that I've ever had to have. I had thought of the idea of a book at the time, but it just sort of escaped me. Then Christmas Eve last year, I received a phone call from a friend of mine I went through school with, asking me if there were any resources to talk to children, as his brother-in-law had had a massive seizure, and they decided to donate his organs and wanted to be able to talk to his little boy about it. And I didn't know of any resources, but I put him in touch with the right people, and the team, there's a massive team behind you when you actually go down the process of organ donation. There's social workers, there's all these people in there behind the scenes that are working to help make this process as seamless and as cathartic as they can. And so that really stuck with me, because I think, especially as a mum, thinking, oh my gosh, losing a loved one on Christmas Day, it's just not, that's awful. And so it stuck with me, and around New Year's Day I just had this book title in my head, and the book just came to me. And so the book is focusing on the fact that it is about organ donation, but it's also from a child's perspective. So therefore it's not scary. It tells them about that loved one passing over, about all the ways that that loved one possibly could be near them later on in life. And the book is called A Gift Before I Go.
Now, you've also turned this book into like a memento book, is that right? Or a memory book?
Yeah, as I mentioned before with the handprint, that was probably one of the most healing points of our journey. And since I've done a little bit of speaking for organ donation around that, my auntie actually had that handprint put onto a necklace for Mum's first birthday after she passed away. And it just, on those days when I'm having a tough day, I hold it and it just feels like she's with me. It's like she's holding my hand. Since I've spoken at a few events, other donor families have made the comment, wow, I would have loved something like that, or I wish I'd had something like that from my loved one, or my child passed away and I